So I'm really pleased to be here to get to give you an update on the status of the waterfront work in Seattle. As I think many of you know, we are now under construction. This is a project that I've been involved with since 2009 under Mayor Nichols at the time. And it is a big project. This is probably the largest project the city has done since we built the transit tunnel under 3rd Avenue. And so it's just really quite a complex animal to pull all the different elements of this together. First off, I come to you from the city's Office of the Waterfront. That's a new office that was created by Mayor Murray when he came into office in January. And it's pretty exciting. It's something we haven't done too often in Seattle, where we actually created an office that brings together the different city departments that are responsible for implementing this project. So my home department is city planning. I've been very involved in the redevelopment of South Lake Union, other planning and zoning initiatives around the city. But for this project, we decided to integrate my team doing the work on the waterfront with the Seattle Department of Transportation. The Seattle Aquarium is planning a significant expansion of the aquarium facility that we're working closely with them on. We're also working with Pike Place Market, which is doing some redevelopment on its western face that I'll describe to you in more detail. Both of those projects closely integrated with the redevelopment of the viaduct space. And then a really big one that a lot of people don't know about is the reconstruction of Coleman Dock. So Coleman Dock is the largest ferry terminal in North America. It has about 8.5 million users a year. Really intense facility, and it's at the end of its useful life. So we're working with the state of Washington that actually operates the ferry system. The ferry system is actually part of the highway system in the state of Washington. And so as part of this project, we're designing and helping them implement the future terminal building at Coleman Dock. Think about it as the way that Magnuson Park and Sandpoint provide recreational facilities that serve the whole city. We have landmark parks like Discovery Park, like Seward Park, that are places that people come from across the city to get an experience that you don't otherwise get. We think this new waterfront is going to be that type of a park, but in the heart of the city. One of the things that's really been amazing to me, because I kind of come from the city planning perspective on this, is just the sheer scale of downtown development that's going on in Seattle. So we've added close to 9,000 residential units over the past 10 years in the heart of the city, which is where we want them. The state and the city have spent decades doing growth management planning to try to encourage densification in the urban core, where we have transit, where we have services, where we have our job, our regional economic core, but we really don't have the parks and public spaces to support that density, to support the residential population that we're adding to the center of Seattle. So that is a very important part of this project, is bringing that park space to support that residential growth. So you'll see there, in addition to the linear, promenade and the roadway that you see running along where Alaskan Way is today, you'll see these east-west connections. This is something we learned very early on in the work, was the importance of not only improving the waterfront, but really connecting it back into the heart of the city, into Pioneer Square, into the retail core, into the office core, and into Belltown. And so we've actually expanded the program to include improvements to streets like Main and Washington in Pioneer Square, streets like Columbia and Seneca and Union streets, as well as Bell Street and the Pike Pine corridor, which is obviously the heart of the connection from Pike Place Market up to the retail district. I mentioned the seawall project. I wanted to just talk about that for a second so that you know what that's all about. One of the things, there's really two things the seawall does. The first is it provides that fundamental structural stability for our downtown. You may not know that if you were to look at the original shoreline of Seattle, kind of pre-settlement, it was kind of back at Post Alley. We filled much of this shoreline, and we did it for a couple of reasons. Basically to get out to the deep water and to preserve and to create as much space for economic activity on the waterfront as possible. The result of that is the soils down there are very poor. They're liquefiable. They're full of old ship holes. They're full of ballast. They're full of garbage from early days of Seattle. And so that seawall provides that strong concrete foundation that holds up the first couple blocks of our downtown, to be perfectly blunt. And so that's the number one thing that it does. The second thing it does is it actually provides a safe corridor for salmon migration. And a lot of people don't realize this, but our downtown seawall is a major highway for juvenile salmon who are migrating up and down the Duwamish corridor. So if you go down there and put on your habitat biologist hat, you will see thousands of juvenile salmon moving up and down that environment. It has not been a very attractive one for them, to say the least. So what we're doing with the project, and I won't bore you with all the science of it, but we're basically creating good habitat for salmon on our downtown seawall. The key thing that we're doing with the project is really opening up the water's edge and creating more space for walking and biking and that sort of thing. That sidewalk today is about 15 to 20 feet wide on average. It's, aside from the Pike Pine corridor, it's the second densest pedestrian environment in the city. So in terms of when you go down there, not just in good weather, but in all weather, people are basically shoulder to shoulder much of the time. So a big part of what we're doing is taking that sidewalk from 15 to 20 feet to about 35 feet in width. This is a section that shows you what the new waterfront will look like. These are the pier buildings on the water side. These are the big buildings that run along the east side of Alaskan Way. You can see the ghosted-in footprint of the viaduct right there. So basically, the nutshell idea here is you're opening up that water side with a wide public sidewalk. One of the most important things we heard from the public is the importance of getting out over the water, kind of reclaiming these public parks over the water so that people can really get back to the Elliott Bay. There's several public parks on the waterfront. Waterfront Park, which is right next to the Seattle Aquarium, and then Pier 62-63, which is a big open expanse on the waterfront today. Both of these piers are in poor structural condition. Everything on our waterfront gets beat up every year by all the wave action and the weather. And so we need to rebuild these piers. And so our design for them is really to take what they are today and integrate them into one contiguous public space so that Waterfront Park, Pier 62-63, and the Seattle Aquarium all feel like you're in one central public space, as opposed to right now, with the viaduct going right through the middle, they really feel very broken up and separate from each other. So a big part of what we want to do with these public parks is create programming opportunities, performances, music, farmers markets, other types of markets that can push out the shoulder seasons, can get people down to the waterfront in the fall, in the early spring, in addition to the summer months. So this is an image of that waterfront park that I was just showing you. And this is what it might look like on a good summer day when it has a water feature operating. And then this is what it might look like in the fall when we have a market event. So that water feature is designed to basically, it turns off and it creates a dry surface that can be used for any number of activities. And then the other thing that we're very keen on doing is bringing back significant public music and performance to the waterfront. So concerts on the pier, I'm sure many folks participated in those. We haven't been able to do them for years because the pier is not in good enough structural condition to support the weight. And so this pier will give us the place to once again start doing large performances on the waterfront. We're very excited to be able to bring that back. The result of that budget reset activity is that we are adding some things like the Pike Pine corridor, but we're also going to phase some things. We're going to hold off on the reconstruction of Pier 62-63 as an example. That's a very expensive reconstruction because of the work in water, and we're going to hold that off for a future capital project in the city. You may have seen in the newspaper this idea of a floating pool barge has gotten a lot of media attention. That was an idea that was intended for private philanthropy to potentially fund that, but we've decided to basically defer that as well, the pool barge concept. But otherwise, the project is largely intact. We've done a few edits and simplifications in other places. We're primarily just moving into a phase where we're going to be very tightly managing our budget as we move forward.